Hey y'all, we're going to get into this episode of Love and Marriage Huntsville, Season 6, Episode 12, titled We Got a Monster Issue. Now, before we get into this review, y'all, I just want to make a PSA. Y'all was mad at me about the last Huntsville review, especially you millimeters, but I like to let y'all know that I'm not here to sing Mel's praises, Martell's, Tisha's, Marceau's, anybody's praises. But if Melody is wrong, she is wrong, and that goes for everybody on the show. Mel is not an exception. Everybody has their faves, and I have mine as well, but this is a review, and these are my opinions. I love the comments and interacting and seeing your thoughts and stuff, but I don't agree with some people claiming that Mel is the only person on the show that shows black excellence. I will agree that in the past few seasons, we haven't been shown the best that they could do when it comes to their businesses and stuff, because it's been a whole lot of drama. And the show hasn't been promoting the cast achievements, but I've been following the show since the very first season. I follow everybody on Instagram, so I know who these people portray themselves to be for the show. The show has recently gotten better with showing what everybody is doing, because for the last few seasons, it was just showing like Mel singing and all of that extra stuff. And I'm not here to jot down what Tisha and Marceau are doing, or what KIMMI and MAURICE are doing, or anybody else, unless they trying to throw me a check. But it's not just Mel who's out here doing stuff, and y'all see that on the show. So don't come in these comments and try and play with me like Melody is the only one getting shit done. She just has the most clout, and y'all take that for being better. That doesn't necessarily make her better. She's just more popular. And that's props to her. I'm not here to knock her hustle, but that's props to everyone on the show as well, not just her. This is not just her show. But anyways, in my opinion, they all show black excellence. And whatever my definition may be, it does not have to be the same as yours. Everybody is different. So don't try and come at me like Mel doesn't do anything wrong when she's blood and bones, just like the rest of us, and is human, and she fucks up and she makes mistakes. Y'all hold everybody else on the show to the cross when they do anything, but y'all act like Mel is perfect. She is not the Mel-ssiah, and I don't care how corny y'all thought that was. It was corny as shit, but I liked it. So anyways, I'm more than neutral when it comes to this show. So please, Millimeters, Mel fans, I don't hate the lady. I just don't like her. Just be respectful in the comments. But if you enjoy this review, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe. Now let's get into it. Real quick, I wanted to say thank you for the over 100 subs. I really appreciate it, y'all. It makes it easier wanting to come back and, give my commentary and my opinions, because even though we might not all agree, it's still just people interacting with me. So I appreciate it, and just thank y'all so much. So we continue off with Lisa and Stormi talking and Betty walking up on them. And then when Stormi sees Betty, she says, "Can I stop you from talking or from saying anything?" And Betty straight says no and shakes her head. And Stormi looks at her aunt and says, "See, she can't. But Lisa and Betty need to talk and not argue. And it's going to always be like that." And Lisa says, "No, it's not." But she not looking at Betty. She got her back turned towards her. And in the background, you see Junior coming to see what's going on. Stormi tells her mom and her aunt that as long as she's living, and she prays she lives a long time, that she's never going to give up on the fact that she wants to see them as close as they used to be when she and Junior were young, and that they got to work their shit out. In a confessional, Stormi says maybe with the Junior situation, she should have just left it alone, because after all of that, she and Junior are good now. But now she has to figure out as far as her mom and her aunt, because now everything is getting worse and she doesn't want that. And then Stormi asked her mom to go talk to her sister, and she says, if you don't do nothing for me, can you just do that? She says, like, just go hug your sister. And Betty says, how the fuck she gonna, hug somebody walking away? Yeah, Betty is the type to be like, she shall not be moved, because she not trying to compromise for nothing. She called her nephew a condescending little prick. She told her sister that she don't like her shit to stink. And now she cussing in front of the livestock. She gotta chill out. It's like, no. In his confessional, Martell says he and Mel are going through things with the kids, and Mel put the kids in therapy, and the judge saw right for the father to receive therapy as well. and says at the beginning he was hesitant because he always thought, he got it. But going to therapy, it gives you an outlet to open up and be vulnerable and not be judged and know he's not being judged, and he feels that's helping a lot. Well, hopefully he realizes that he doesn't got it and he ain't had it for a minute now. And when he did have it, it was with Mel, most likely. And like I said, I don't like the lady, but I'll give her props when it's due. She kept that man afloat, and without her, he's been a mess. But also, it seems like nobody liked Dr. Francis on the show as a counselor when he came around. And I think it was because he was more straightforward and no BS. And from these shows I watch, some of these men, and don't come at me because I saw somebody say, oh, I come at black men a lot. No, I'm just trying to keep it straight because nobody wants to hear that shit. But it seems like from these shows that I watch, not just Huntsville, these men don't like to be reprimanded by other men. Like most of the guys on the show, this show particularly, didn't like what Dr. Francis had to say about anything. And I think Martell went back to him a few times. And, not every therapist is for everyone, but I find it interesting that now he feels like he can be more receptive when it's coming from a woman. Because sometimes the things that you get told from a woman, they come in a more, delicate manner. You'll see that later, even in the episode when Kiowa and MAURICE and KIMMI were all talking to Monster. You could just tell Kiowa was like, oh yeah, my son is clamming up. He is not comfortable right now, so let me give him some space and so he can talk to me on his own. But I just thought that was interesting. Martell thanks his therapist for seeing him today, and they get into talking, and the therapist asked him about his holistic wellness and balance. And I'd realized, isn't this the same therapist that Melody saw last season, where Melody said people get her out of character and then she responds in a certain way, and then the therapist told her, well, it's her responsibility to control how she responds and reacts, and Melody wasn't really trying to hear that shit? Oh, okay. But Martell says he's off balance right now, and the therapist says that she's glad he admitted that. Martell says it's tough sometimes. He says his babysitter canceled at the last minute, and his therapist says she wants to know how he functions when things don't go as planned, and she says she knows he can kind of ride the wave. And Martell says not tonight, she should have seen him. And she chuckles, and he says that he got mad at his mom and at the babysitter because people aren't doing what they say they're going to do. And he says in some situations he'd be ready to cuss somebody out. And, though he loves his mom to death, but why is it always an argument when he asks her to watch his kids and says he gives her this and that, but when he's hesitant on doing that, it's because she's not trying to help him out. His therapist says it seems to be an unhealthy relationship because if either of them don't get what they want, there's tension regardless. And Martell says he would definitely say so. And in his confessional, he says a healthy relationship is equal, and when it's one-sided, it's not cool, and says he knows he's been selfish in the past and it cost him dearly. Yeah, well. And then the therapist asks Martell where his dad is, and he hesitates a bit and says that he's in Huntsville somewhere. He's not sure. He hasn't talked to him in over a year. And she asks if something happened. And Martell gets into his dad being incarcerated for over 2 decades, and when he got out, they became close. And then they show a clip of Martell and his dad going on a little fishing trip, and Martell telling him that they never talked about his dad not being a part of his life and being incarcerated and stuff. And Martell continues to tell his therapist that he was coming around, his dad was coming around and things like that. But as time progressed, he kind of pulled away. She asked if he feels like there's a void with him not being there at this point in his life. And Martell immediately says, oh no, he would never say he's like this because his dad wasn't there. He feels like that's a cop-out when people say that. And his therapist says she agrees, but Martell continues to say it's funny because his mom would say, son, you are who you are, but says that she would say that because of his younger brother. And the therapist asked, surprisingly, Martell, you're the oldest? Martell says, yeah, he's 5 years older than Montez. And I'm like, I had no idea, honestly. Like, I don't recall them mentioning he had any siblings, because the way Miss Marlene is always like, my son about Martell, I figured he was the only child. But Martell says Montez is like a bit on the bad side, but he's a good dude. In his confessional, Martell says he and his brother have the same mom, as a single parent, but growing up, it was a struggle, and, Miss Marlene did the best she could, and says that he takes full responsibility for the person he is and doesn't fault his parents for anything that he's gone through. His therapist tells him his homework is to reassess those relationships because he's changing and he needs to make sure that they are inclusive to his life and where he's going. And that's the end of his scene. In a confessional, Maurice says he planned this date night for KIMMI and they're going to be painting, and he invited the other Scots. Maurice says to KIMMI, like, this is a good date night, isn't it? And she says, well, you did good so far. And I'm like, y'all just sat down. What the fuck he do? And I mean, yeah, it's the thought that counts, but let's see how this double date really goes, And then the woman guiding their little sipping paint tells them that they might still want to hand wash what they're about to make. And Maurice looks at KIMMI and says, well, that's your department. And Maurice has like a yikes look on his face. And KIMMI keeps asking, like, what's my department? What's my department? And he says, cleaning and stuff. And she says, Maurice, whatever, and that Monster needs to see him washing a glass or two. And Maurice looks straight up at KIMMI and says, well, why you say that about Monster? And she says, because Monster don't really do nothing. And he says, if he isn't there, he wants KIMMI to tell Monster, like, hey, this is what I want you to do, and make him do it. And I'm like, didn't y'all have a whole episode about her needing backup already? Like, why are we... Poor Monster. They be trying to make this kid seem like he is such a problem, and he really not. He just miss his mama. He miss his mother, and I get it. Tisha and Marceau walk in, and in a confessional, Marceau says with all the moving parts with the building renovations and everything he and Tisha got going on, tensions are getting a little high. So when Maurice mentioned the date night, he was like, yeah, let's get on board because maybe it'll ease some of that tension. Tisha asked KIMMI and Maurice if they had any interesting conversations, while they were waiting on them. And Maurice says, yeah, punishing Monster. And both Tisha and Marceau look perplexed, and they say, well, what did he do? And Maurice starts to lie on KIMMI and says that she doesn't feel at liberty to punish Monster. And KIMMI says in a frustrated tone that that's not true. And I'm like, Kimberly Scott, this man has been saying the same shit all season. If you don't tell him to stop speaking for you and lying, because anyone with common sense understands what she means with this Monster situation. But to him, to me, it just seems like Maurice wants KIMMI and Kiowa and Monster to have a problem. Like, for some reason, it's just like he putting all of this on to KIMMI and making it seem like, well, she's the one not moving forward. She's the one who don't want to do nothing. When it's him, Monster don't want to talk to him. And KIMMI can't talk to him because Maurice seems so fragile. Like, she got to tiptoe around his feelings all the time. So, yeah, this thing is ridiculous. Marceau jokes and tells KIMMI to hush and let Maurice speak for her. And KIMMI laughs, and Maurice says, yes, that's exactly what it is. And I'm like, you think that's okay? Like, whatever. KIMMI says that Maurice's paraphrasing is awful. She says she asked Monster to rake the leaves, and he never did, and points to Maurice and said that not once did he tell Monster to get back out there and rake the leaves. And Marceau tells Maurice, like, you gotta back her up a little bit. And KIMMI just keeps saying, he don't back me up at all. None. And basically, Maurice says, while he has no problem backing her up, he just feels like she doesn't actually need backup on this. And at the end of the day, this is their son who lives under their roof. And if she tells him to do the dishes at 2 a.m., then get up and do the dishes. And KIMMI tells Maurice that kids are touchy on how people handle them, and Maurice says, well, you're saying it like he's not your kid too. And he stays trying to put words in her mouth. Like, that is annoying, and that would make anyone feel like, well, maybe I need to tiptoe around you because obviously what I'm saying you're not registering. KIMMI sighs and tells Maurice to stop acting like he doesn't get it. In a confessional, Maurice tells Kimmy he doesn't think there should be any kind of hesitation or pause when it comes to raising Monster. He thinks Kimmy has earned and deserved that right to raise him without tiptoeing around Kiowa's feelings. Kimmy tells him that she tiptoes around his feelings, and he says, well, you shouldn't. And she says, well, I do, because he's the maternal parent. And Maurice talks over Kimmy and tells her that, well, he's empowering her not to tiptoe, and that, in fact, she should never have to do that around her home. And Kimmy is looking like, oh, well, isn't that right? And to me, it really sounds like Maurice wants Kimmy to do all the parenting with Monster because she has experience with Jalen, and also because he doesn't want to do it. And that part about tiptoeing over his feelings is the realest shit Kimmy has ever said in a while, because she did that at the very beginning of the scene while he was hyping up, trying to sit down like, oh, this is a good date night, and expecting to get accolades, knowing Kimmy is going to throw him some regardless if she's all for it or not. And it's like she's dealing with her own child and her husband. Like, anybody would be frustrated. So they all actually paint something for a second, but then Tisha asks Kimmy if she punishes Monster. And Kimmy says, yeah, that's where the conversation started. She told him to clean his room and he didn't. So she told him he had to go rake the leaves. And Marcel asks Kimmy, so you told Maurice you told Monster about raking the leaves? And Kimmy says, absolutely. And Marcel asks, and what did Reese say? And Kimmy says, Maurice always says, well, why are you telling me? And Tisha tells Kimmy that she does think she and Kiowa should be able to communicate about Monster because she's his second mom, and they have to be able to come together and communicate properly. Maurice says he's been the one trying to foster that relationship for years, and he thinks Kiowa will move forward, but he thinks that they can both move forward. And Kimmy says, so you think Kiowa will move forward, and I'm staying stagnant, kind of chuckling. And Maurice says he doesn't believe that Kimmy has even checked to see if they've moved forward. And Kimmy asks if he's really serious, like how could he say that? And Marceau asks Kimmy if she thinks Maurice supports her in that, and Kimmy says no. And Tisha cuts in and asks how can Maurice be more supportive? And Marceau says he has a suggestion. How about they have a meeting as a family, and if Maurice has a business thing, maybe don't leave Kimmy to talk to Kiowa and her husband alone to go to your business meeting. And then they show a clip of Maurice doing exactly that, like a season or two ago. Maurice tries to explain his way out of that situation, and Marceau says, well, it wasn't as important as what they had going on. And Maurice kind of snaps and says, well, as a lawyer, sometimes you have to meet with your clients. And Marceau just kind of makes a face. And Kimmy says that the primary goal is to take care of Monster, and Tisha says, right. And in the confessional, Maurice says he would like all the parents to be on the same page if they're going to raise Monster correctly. And says he's going to schedule a family meeting to talk about the issues of Monster, and everybody can get out their issues or any other issues that they have that are unresolved. And Kimmy tells him he keeps making these little shady side comments like she's the one at fault. And Maurice says he's not saying she's at fault, it's just things are unresolved. Tisha says Marceau is trying to start something up in their household, and she's not trying to let that happen, and thinks Kimmy and Maurice for inviting them. But Kimmy and Maurice's faces are kind of tore up, and that's the end of that scene. Child, that date night didn't go as Maurice thought it would. What did it? In his confessional, Martell says after his therapy session, he decided to reevaluate some of his relationships in his life, so he reached out to his little brother and says that he was paroled about a year ago and recently got married, and he's just trying to see where his brother's mind is and make sure he doesn't go back to jail ever again. And Martell asks his brother what he's been up to, and Montez says that he's been on the street, he just got out probation, but he guess, he got some help from his big bro. And Martell says he's always down to help in any way he can. And Montez says, yeah, teach me some things. And I'm not gonna lie to y'all, Montez, he seems so soft-spoken and sweet and just a little teddy bear. And I know he not. I know he been through some stuff. But he looked like he just needed a hug in this scene, y'all. He just looked like he needed a big hug. And, it just made me sad to see his face. In the confessional, Martell says he was always that role model and big brother, and he always told Montez that he has to want it for himself. And they show pictures of Martell and Montez growing up. He says his little brother didn't always listen, but he's glad he's listening now. Montez updates Martell on his new job, and Martell asks how he's been, and then asks what Martell thinks the reason was as to why he never had a 9 to 5. And Martell says, being in the streets and neither of them having a dad to push them. And Martell says he doesn't know how life would have been if their dads were in their lives. And Montez said probably worse. Martell lets his younger brother know that if he didn't have any changed behavior when he did, then both of them will probably be in the same boat. And Martell tells Montez that getting married changed a lot for him. And even though he got a divorce at the beginning, it had him more focused. Having one woman, somebody to come home to, made it easy for him to focus on business. And other things, Martell hoped. But Montez asked Martell what he and Mel is going through now. Like, what's up, because he says he hasn't seen Mel for a while. And then asked Martell if he gonna get in the studio. And Martell's like, what? And Montez laughs and mentioned the diss track that Mel made about Martell, and they both laugh. And then they show a clip of Mel and her flat ass runs singing to her song in her studio. And then Martell gets the spotlight off of him and asks Montez what is his marriage like for him right now. And Montez says it's hard right now because this is his first time in a real relationship. And Martell cuts in and says, well, the thing is, make sure y'all satisfy each other and, satisfying your mate. That's it. And I'm like, oh, Lord, here he go. It ain't all about the Rudy and the Tootie, Martell. It's about trust and loyalty, shorty. In a confessional, Martell says he hopes his little brother can learn from his mistakes and that it's good to have a wife, somebody to keep you focused and grounded in business and life, and says having a good wife will help you become a better man. But y'all gotta be right for each other. It's not just about the wife being good for her husband. It's vice versa. Are you gonna be good for her too, Martell? But then he asked Montez if him having a wife will make him go harder. And Montez says he gotta get some kind of motivation in him. And Martell tells his brother that he told him back in the day that, he's a businessman. He's basically running his own operation just in the wrong way. And he could have flipped it around and, ran him a real solid company. And then he asked his brother if he wants to have his own business. And Montez says, yeah, of course. And then Martell says what he really wanted to talk to him about was the little Black Business Expo event and the concept, and asked his brother if he wants to go. And Montez says, yeah, but you can tell he's just kind of probably trying to just please his older brother because Montez doesn't seem to have the energy or the fight in him no more. I just want to give that man a hug because he just seems so out of it and sad. But that's the end of that scene. So they all get together to sit down and talk, and in the confessional, Maurice says Kiowa's in Huntsville because it's the meeting that they planned, and he's trying to make sure everybody's on the same page. And KIMMI chuckles and says Maurice is the only one not on the same page, but she's here for it and she's glad Kiowa was able to make it. KIMMI asks Monster, what are they going to do for his birthday because it's coming up, and ask him what he wants. And Monster shrugs, and KIMMI asks Monster why he doesn't want to get his license. And before he answers, there's a knock on the door, and Monster gets up and answers it and says he does want to get his license, but he has to get his permit for 6 months. Obviously, Monster is not as motivated as they would like him to be, but like I said, he just misses his mom. I've been saying this since I started reviewing the show. He misses his mother, and that's just all it is. It's not that he don't want to listen, he don't want to do nothing. When you don't have your mom, you're not motivated to do shit. And I think KIMMI realized that, but, telling Maurice anything, sometimes he don't even listen or hear or care. Monster opens the door and he hugs his mom, and then Kiowa greets everybody, and it's kind of awkward. And you can tell everybody's feeling the tension because Kiowa and Monster are kind of making faces. But KIMMI asks Kiowa how her trip was, and, it's still real awkward. And Maurice says he invited Kiowa there so that they can be all on the same page, and asked her if Monster told her about boot camp, and she says no. And then he mentions that they get up at 5 a.m. and that Monster has been going on with it kind of well. Kiowa says, so you get up at 5 a.m. and what else? That's the same thing KIMMI said. But then Monster says, and he does chores, but that's about it. KIMMI says it's not very many things he has to do, to be perfectly honest. And she mentions laundry in his room and asks, what's the agreement for doing it? And Monster responds, he has to do laundry every week. KIMMI says that's right, but it just has to be a priority in his world. Maurice asks Kiowa, so now that she's heard about boot camp, does she have any disagreements or anything? She says no, but it sounds like certain things need to be adjusted, and says that KIMMI said that, if chores aren't being done, that maybe Monster needs help getting the stuff done he needs to, but tells Monster that that's on him to do that part. Maurice calls Monster out and is like, why is your face looking like that? You don't look receptive to the conversation. And Monster was like, well, I don't know what that means, but there's really no face for it. And then KIMMI tells Monster that she doesn't want to keep giving him her ideas that she think might help him, but she wants to know some of his, and he says he doesn't really have any right now. And Maurice asked him why, and Monster says he hadn't thought about it like that. And Maurice says, well, now is the perfect time to start thinking, and Monster puts his head down. And I get it, no teenager or kid wants to sit with their authority figures and get reprimanded, especially now on live television. Poor Monster has been going through it with Maurice, Kiowa, and KIMMI since the show started. And he don't want to be on this shit no more. Poor thing. But Kiowa tries to change the subject and asks Monster how his grades are, and he says that they are better, and Kiowa says that she doesn't understand. He wants to get good grades, but he isn't doing the work. And Monster says that, yeah, he has a goal, but he doesn't feel like it at times. And he just doesn't feel motivated. Like, he obviously doesn't really spend much time with Maurice, and yeah, he loves KIMMI, but that's not his blood parent. Like, a bonus parent is cool all day, but you want the real thing. And it's no shame to KIMMI, it's nothing like that, but Maurice wanted Monster to move with him. Monster told him that he didn't want to, but Maurice got his way anyway. And now the poor boy is there, and y'all keep saying that he not doing this, he not motivated. Are you trying to motivate him? Getting up at 5 a.m. is gonna make anybody not wanna wash no dishes or rake no fucking leaves. Now, some people do that, but this is a 16-year-old boy. Cut him some slack, please, Maurice. Kiowa tries to save the day again and tells Monster, okay, well, maybe they can talk about it over dinner. And he nods and says, okay. Maurice tells Monster that them talking at him doesn't really matter so much. It's just, he has to have the same stuff on the inside, and he's running out of time. And speaking of, tells him to go finish his homework or something. And the fact that he realized that he was talking at Monster and not to him, that tells you a lot. But not gonna lie, Monster looked like he wanted to tell Maurice to fuck off. But Monster gets up and he goes. In the confessional, Maurice says he's glad Kaya was there so that they can have the meeting and so Monster can see that they're all on the same page. KIMMI says, except she doesn't think that they are on the same page, and says she's curious to hear what Kiowa has to say. Kiowa tells Maurice and KIMMI that she thinks that was a healthy conversation. She just doesn't want Monster to feel like they are ganging up on him. Maurice says it couldn't be y'all ganging up on him because he was the only one on the island. But it seems like Maurice only went harder because Kai was there, in my opinion. But KIMMI says she said what she needed to say to Monster. It's just Maurice says everything longer. And Maurice says he thinks Monster needs to understand that there's a certain urgency he needs to have right now that he doesn't. Kiowa asked the burning question, do they think Monster has some feelings of not being around his mom and he doesn't know what to do with it, that he basically misses her? And Maurice says it could be, because Kiowa babied him a lot and he's asking Monster to grow up. And I'm like, here he go. And Kiowa says she can be honest that she did most of the things for Monster, but it's not just babying him. She nurtured him. And in the confessional, KIMMI says Maurice seems to be rolling his eyes at Kiowa for babying Monster, but his plan doesn't seem to be effective either at this particular point. But there's got to be a middle between drill sergeant and Monster being babied. KIMMI tells Maurice she feels like he expects Monster to turn into a young man without all the proper tools, and basically tells his ass he needs to spend more time with Monster. And Maurice says he does spend time with him, picking him up and taking him to school. And before he could say anything else, both Kiowa and KIMMI said that's not spending time with him. And I just couldn't believe he really used those two examples. Like, no, sir, that is not enough. KIMMI says, please don't let those be your first two examples. And Maurice says he spends hours with Monster. KIMMI says sitting in traffic doesn't count. And Maurice says, who helps him with his homework? And KIMMI says, well, if you helped Monster with his homework every day, he wouldn't be behind right now. And Maurice says, nah, he doesn't help him with his homework every day, no. And KIMMI says, so let's not go there. Maurice was getting his ass embarrassed. That's why he couldn't take it no more. These Scott men have to understand, and I mean Maurice and Marceau, they have to understand that it's okay not to know everything. But Maurice says that there's a limit to him helping Monster with everything. KIMMI says a lot of the time Monster spends there is in his room by himself, and looks at Kiowa and asks, does it sound like she's making any sense at all? And Kiowa looked like it pained her to agree with KIMMI almost, but she says yes. And Maurice says no, KIMMI is discounting how much time he's spent with Monster. And KIMMI says Monster is a loving kid. He likes hugs and stuff. So when he's not able to get that on a regular basis because his mom doesn't live there, then she would think that the next person he looks to is Maurice. And in a confessional, KIMMI says she doesn't know if Monster needs a drill sergeant in boot camp or versus a dad spending time with him. And KIMMI tells Maurice that driving to school and fussing at him about what he did the night before isn't spending time with him. She says, having fun is. And Maurice says that he is Monster's #1 fan and that he's always supportive. Like, okay, Mr. Defensive, relax. Kiowa asks KIMMI and Maurice how they would feel about her being more present more often for Monster, here in Huntsville. And Maurice says that he thinks it would be helpful and asks her, would it make her more present if she knew that maybe Monster is missing her a little bit more? And Kiowa says, yeah, well, seeing that he's dealing with some feelings, then yeah. And Maurice says, what do you mean? And Kiowa says because of his body language and the way he was acting, he wasn't saying what he really wanted to, but you could see the wheels turning. So, that says that something's going on. And that's all I'm saying. A mother knows. Even if the child doesn't say anything, a mother knows when something's going on. Maurice is so busy doing other things, he's not in tune with that with Monster. Maurice asks Kiowa if she thinks that he's not saying stuff because he's there. And she says it could be, and that Maurice is very hard on Monster sometimes, so he may not feel comfortable saying certain things to him. And Maurice doesn't look happy about it at all, but he says, gotcha. It's okay not to know everything, Maurice, that's all I'm saying. But obviously Monster needs some TLC. He's been missing his mom, and that's all it is. And honestly, his chores and school would probably improve so much better if his parents was around him more. He's living with his dad, but his dad isn't ever really home. But that's the end of their scene. So the next scene was with Stormi and Courtney, and I'm not going to spend too much time on them because they were just in the car talking about Junior and Lisa and Miss Betty and how Stormi just wants them to be a family and come together because she doesn't know if, something might happen to her mom and she can't go to her aunt because things are so tense and they don't talk no more. And Courtney's trying to be supportive, but he be telling her not to cry in the confessional. And, because he don't do that crying shit. But, I don't know, it's an unfortunate situation, sometimes there are those sibling rivalries, but Stormi gotta put her foot down with her mama. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. Like, Miss Betty is wild. Like, y'all thought Miss Wanda was bad. Betty don't give a fuck about nothing or nobody. And Courtney even said, Betty don't want to share Stormi. And is it because she got the funds? Is it because she got this money? Like, I mean, I don't think that's fair. Yes, that's her daughter, but obviously your daughter wants to have a relationship with her aunt and her cousin, and you're making that harder for her. That's not okay. And Stormi is being affected because she keeps saying, she's not going to stop until they get it right, and she want to do vacations and family reunions and stuff, and she can't do that because every time they get together it's a mess. But hopefully they can figure it out. But that was basically what their scene was about. It wasn't about much else. So we're back with KIMMI and MAURICE, and he asks KIMMI how does he feel about Kiowa saying Monster has some feelings, and he kind of shrugs. And KIMMI says she can understand it might be hard for Monster, being away from his mom. And she says that maybe MAURICE, Monster, and Kiowa can do like a family therapy session. And MAURICE says we, like he and KIMMI, along with Kiowa and Monster, can do a family therapy session. And no, sir, you need to raise your son and spend time with him and stop dragging your wife along to do your work. She can do as much as she's comfortable with, but she's not going to overstep. No matter how many times you keep telling her it's okay to be stern, it's okay to do this, it's okay to do that, she's not going to overstep. KIMMI says that they can determine maybe that's part of the reason why Monster gets so stoic and doesn't talk a lot. And she wouldn't be surprised if he's holding back some things that are emotional for him. And says Monster's body language is all over the place sometimes, but she thinks that he gets tired of hearing MAURICE talk because he talks for a long time. So Kiowa and Monster sit down, and she asks him what's his take on their conversation from earlier, and if he feels like his dad spends enough time with him, or if he feels like, there are feelings that he might not be able to express, or he feels like he doesn't have anyone to talk to. Monster says that he does have people to talk to, he just doesn't want to. And Kiowa says, well, you got to get it out or it can have a negative effect on you. And Monster says he does sometimes, but it won't be to anyone. He says he'll talk to himself and says that he'll just move on. Kiowa says she doesn't like to hear that and that he has to find someone to talk to and have healthy thoughts and feelings with. And then she asks him how does he feel about her being around more and being more active, and his poor little face kind of lit up and says that he wouldn't mind that, and then they both smiled at each other. And then she asks him how much would he like her to be around, and Monster says whatever she can fit in her schedule. And it's just that poor baby missed his mama. That's all it is. It ain't nothing, against MAURICE or KIMMI. He just missed his mommy. KIMMI tells MAURICE she thinks that there's a different type of emotional energy in a mother-son relationship. And MAURICE says maybe they should go to family therapy, but without her, meaning KIMMI. And he just got an attitude because this meeting didn't go the way he was expecting it. And KIMMI asks him why is he being like that. And he says it's because, she said that they, Kiowa and MAURICE should go, and he is thinking that, she must not be a parent. Boy, go to hell, because that ain't make no sense. KIMMI says she's not the one who carried Monster. And MAURICE says as far as parents, he thinks they should all go. KIMMI says for all of them to show up, she feels like it might overwhelm Monster. And in a confessional, she says she wouldn't mind joining the group therapy session. However, she is of the belief that a child might open up a bit better with just his two parents there. MAURICE says his whole idea is toward inclusion, and KIMMI rolls her eyes. MAURICE says every time they meet up, he would like it to be the bonus parents as well. Why? Because they are all parenting Monster together. And KIMMI says she agrees she was at the last bonus parent meeting, but he left. And yes, everybody was there, and it was more of the bonus parents than the actual birth parents because of MAURICE. MAURICE is still trying to explain himself out of the reason why he left that meeting. And he says, don't make it seem like I just started out of there. He showed up early. It was just Kiowa and then we're late. And because he still got an attitude, he tells KIMMI that maybe she and Kiowa can have meetings together. And KIMMI says, meetings for what? And MAURICE says, Kiowa says she wants to be more present, and maybe KIMMI and her can work out their past or whatever. And KIMMI says she doesn't have a past to work out. And MAURICE says, let's just discuss it and get it off the table. And KIMMI says it's no reason to, and says that the past is the past, so leave it. And MAURICE says, yeah, he hurt her, so she's still not over it. And it gets tense, and KIMMI says, what exactly do you think I'm going to be over? She's curious, and MAURICE says, listen. And KIMMI says, it's a direct question. She doesn't want no extra stuff. And MAURICE gets dramatic and says, look at this tone. Wow. And KIMMI says, answer the question for real. And then it says to be continued. And you already know it's some BS that he gonna say, but he's just trying, in my opinion, trying to distract from the fact that maybe he's not as present with Monster that he needs to be, and he's trying to project and bring up the old stuff between KIMMI and Kiowa. And apparently they meet each other in the next episode, and they sit, you know, KIMMI and Kiowa, they sit and talk together by themselves, and that should be a lot. But that's the end of this review, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'm gonna see you on the next one.